gave it names, right? Anyway, this is about transparency. Let's get back to that. If I am if I'm finished with this model, what I'm going to do is actually export this whole thing twice. So I'm going to export it once, completely opaque, right? So that um, this whole shoe, it thinks of it as having no opacity, right? And even if and sometimes when I bring it into Blender, when I export this model and bring it into Blender, you'll see it still thinks it has a blended transparency, even though it's set to 0 and off. So sometimes I have to turn it off. It's 3D. It's gonna make us have to do things. So I export it both ways. One way, I export the whole file. I can't export parts. It has to be the whole file. And then I go into Blender. Let's do that stage. So if I've already saved my work, I'm just going to start new to show you. I have nothing in Blender. This is how you do the transparency parts, if you've made them correctly in the first place, right? So you can import. I'm going to import the the GLBs that I exported from, and I've been, just for the sake of brevity, I've been using my downloads folder for everything for this female shoe, and this is going to be where I have several exports, right? And I have my opacity test. I just called it test because I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it did work. So this is where I put the objects with opacity, right? And then the objects that didn't have opacity, they were just regular shoe bits, right? So if I bring in the regular shoe, right, I'll import this. And this shoe, when we look at it, even though it was supposed to be a regular shoe, I've got the problem where the materials are weird. So if I just go to any material, any of these, to their mesh, I can go to the material, and I think I had told this to be opaque, and even some parts seem to be opaque, but I want this to be opaque. So I always go to the opaque or the blend mode section in the shader here. That's in this material, and in settings, if that's closed, you got to open that up, and it's called opaque instead of blended. If it comes in blended, you didn't mean that. You meant this to be opaque, right? So now what I'm going to do is everything that's opaque stays. I'm going to delete the piece that is not opaque. So if I delete that, I think it's gone, right? I'm going to come back with the other parts, right? So that's about right, I guess. Right. So now I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to import the version that has the transparency. So you would think that you could just select the mesh and change the materials, and that would work. That won't work. It actually is somehow information in the mesh itself. So you have to go and get the a totally different export with totally different settings in order for this to work. So if I go to my opacity test, that's where I have this GLB, and I bring that in. Now it's going to be fine that worked, but I still have to delete all the other meshes that are not the transparent bit, which if I go to root node here, I do want to keep clear parts, but I want to delete, I think, everything else. So I might leave outer heel. I don't know. Let's see. Outer heel had a piece. It doesn't matter for the sake of this demo, so I'm just going to delete like this. And it always does this thing where when I delete like that, it deletes the nodes and not the meshes within the nodes. So it's kind of annoying, but it's easy to delete those and get that. Now, this is what I'm talking about. I had one piece that I made that is going to be for solid for this, but I wanted to show you how it's not glitched here. And then when I export these to um, to the model viewer, those also will not be glitched, right? Now in this view, I didn't export the solid part yet, but I can always get that again or add it back in. But I'm going to show you what it looks like as I did the same thing as a USDZ export. It was a little glitchy there, but we don't care. We're going to use a GLB viewer. So always make sure and load up this editor, this model editor, and I already have it in here. Now in this example, the opacity works again. See, but if you don't do it that way, it will look like this. And I have a old screenshot somewhere of that. Let me see. It's in my screenshots folder. I want to show you what it looks like if you tried to export it. Now what's weird is it looks fine when you're in Substance, but if I export this directly, right, even though it looks fine here, what you would get outside of Substance Painter looks like this, where it not only glitches the opacity of the object itself, it also glitches, you know, all through the rest of the shoe, like all the pieces, even though we didn't apply transparency to those other pieces. It bleeds over to it. It's like part of the mesh. So that's why I have to export this thing twice. I export it one time again to make sure and get the opacity and everything together, and then I export it again with no opacity and everything together. And you got to delete the mesh parts of both sides, you know, so that you can have one mesh, one complete mesh that is correct, that has opaque parts and transparent parts. And that's why, you know, it seems like I had to do a bunch of steps there to do that, but that's the only way to get this. And you know, you can look all over the internet. Nobody else knows this. Nobody knows how to make unglitched, perfect. Let me pull it back up here. Nobody apparently knows how to do this. I am the only one. So if you're ever stuck on this again, watch this video again, because even I forget some of these steps, and I have to review my own tutorial to remember how to get this to be unglitched. So you may want to save this somewhere that you can find later.